One of the first stories I read earlier today was a Brandon Marcello-John Talty combination facing identity crisis. Frustrated ACC members point the finger at TV coverage or lack of it. We discussed this a little bit in the opening hour today. John Talty, who's been battling flight issues, who's headed the ACC Media Days, joins us on 365 Sports. John, is there anything they can do about it?
Great question. There obviously they have some theories, but they're in a tough situation. It's really a challenging spot in which you don't have a lot of marquee brands in your conference at this point. The ones that you probably could make an argument that you do have are actively looking to leave. And then, the rest of your brands that you have are kind of, unconnected in some ways. You've got the North Carolina crew, but then you've got Syracuse and Boston College and now SMU and Stanford and Cal. It feels kind of random in some ways, and I think that's what's hard about what they're going through right now with their identity crisis, is that there's just a lot of schools that don't necessarily have one kind of common theme or connectivity between them, and that's kind of where the ACC is.
Dabo Sweeney asked, why don't they have an effing Feinbaum? And that was kind of maybe a little bit shocking for him. But in that regard, when it comes to the ACC network, and Feinbaum might be unique in all of this, but there's not anybody who shills for that league on that channel like Paul Feinbaum is able to on the SEC network. Is there a way to – it's almost too late to create that now, and really is there anybody that could do that?
Well, I think part of it, too, is that it's kind of a chicken or egg thing, right? Where is it that Paul is able to, put out and promote the league, or is it that strong fan base throughout the SEC allows him to have the stature that he has? I think part of the issue the SEC has is that there are not fan bases that are going to be calling in year-round to a call-in show like Paul's, arguing on May 1st who Alabama's starting quarterback is going to be. There are a couple schools like that in the ACC. Florida State's certainly one of them, but it's just hard to imagine Wake Forest fans doing that, in May 1. So that's part of the problem. One of the guys that we quoted in the story is one of the ones that makes sense to me, Danny Canal, currently, under contract with CBS, but he seems to be one of the people that I have at least noticed in terms of ACC-centric personalities who are a bit more boisterous, a bit more willing to be aggressive publicly and trying to, boost the ACC talking points or mentality. But, the truth of it, too, is that, I think Paul is kind of one of one in many ways. And even, I talked to Bill O'Brien for that story, and he was one of the ones banging the drum the hardest for a Paul type personality. And even he admitted, there's probably not someone exactly like him, but we got to find somebody. And I think one of the core things that they believe, Bill O'Brien being one of them, is that, you have to be willing to accept some of the negative with all the positive. Paul's going to kind of stir it up a little bit. It feels like when you watch ACC network programming, no knock on those people, it feels very benign, very down the middle. There's not a lot of controversy in it. And in turn, there's not a lot of spice to that programming. And I think the coaches realize, all right, maybe we need to take a little bit of some of the stuff we don't like when Paul and other people like that are calling for our heads. But the positive is that there's a lot of eyeballs on that, and they're talking about the league year round. And that's part of what ACC football needs right now.
Given, I guess there was some level of expectations for Jim Phillips to start things off. Was he better than you expected, about what you expected, worse? How did you just sort of view his talk today?
Well, I think it was in some ways a perfect encapsulation of the problems they're going through right now, that they're having ACC network technical difficulties, and they weren't even able to show big chunks of his press conference today. I mean, that to me is part of the issue. I do think he was stronger than maybe he's been in the past. You can tell, at least I felt like, that the Florida State and Clemson stuff is starting to get to him. I think that was his strongest defense yet of the problems that those two multiple losses those two schools are causing for the ACC. I was impressed by that. But, part of the challenge, and it's hard to say this, but, I think Jim Phillips is a really nice guy. I think he means well. But I do think he's a nice guy in a poker game full of sharks. There's a lot of other guys who I think are ruthlessly trying to better their conferences. I think Brett Yormark is a great example of that, of a guy who doesn't really care about ruffling feathers and is going to do what he needs to do to make his conference better. It's just hard for me, and also people that I talk to in college space, to just see Jim having the stomach to really do that kind of stuff. It's just not really his style, which is honorable in many ways, but it also sometimes, leads you to have some questions about whether he's going to be able to make that big move or big changes to kind of get the ACC back on an upward trajectory, whereas right now it's still in kind of a fight for survival.
You think that because of there was a report earlier today that Clemson and Florida State will not tell the ACC they're leaving after this year, that means that extends it for this year, next, and how many other years. Does that calm things down at all, in your opinion?
I think it does to some extent. I think it lowers the temperature a little bit, but it still hovers over everything, right? I mean, think about first day of ACC Media Days. What are we talking about right now? We're talking about, are Florida State and Clemson going to stay, and how does ACC fix its identity problem? Well, part of their identity problem is that their top two brands want to leave. So until I think there's a resolution, that's going to continue to loom over, and I think it's going to lead to more questions of, at a certain point, if there's no way to bring them back, there's no way to save the marriage, sometimes you almost would prefer to have the resolution and know, okay, you're leaving, go ahead and go. We're going to figure out our new life with our new, collection of brands moving forward. I think sometimes the more it lingers, it almost can create other problems because there's so much uncertainty. It can create so much angst of your other members. At some point you just want to kind of calm the water. So it's a long way of saying I think it lowers it a little bit, but it's not going away. Certainly anytime soon. And as long as those cases continue to play out legally, it's going to be something the ACC is going to have to deal with essentially every day.
John Talty with us. 247 Sports, CBS Sports on 365 Sports.
John, we've asked a couple of people about this and curious with your opinions, on Clemson and the way that they've kind of soft pedaled this compared to Florida State. Do you feel that Clemson would ever see a day where they would go, that they might just stay?
It's interesting. It does feel like Florida State has been certainly the most aggressive, the most out there. And that's part of I think somewhat of a reflection of the personality of the place, the personality of that fan base, the personality of their trustees. They're just always have been a bit more aggressive, a bit more out there. Clemson, I think, is playing it more true to, kind of what their brand is, a bit more understated. I think very highly of their AD, Graham Neff. He's, kind of more of an under-the-radar guy. He's not really trying to get out there. He's spoken very little about it, and I think that's very intentional. They've kind of been biding their time behind the scenes. So I think it's certainly possible. I mean, one of the big questions of all this, and I think bubbled up again last week, is say you're successful with these lawsuits, which is very much up in the air, very much a question. Where do you go? And I think that question continues to loom for both Clemson and Florida State is where is the actual landing spot for you? Now, they certainly might know more than I do, but we talk to different people at the two most obvious conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC. There's a lot of questions about whether they are a natural fit for those two places. So I think at a certain point, I could see in a scenario in which they say if they're able to get a bigger share of the revenue and ultimately they don't see a better option out there in the landscape right now.
So do you believe, and we've discussed this before, and I know you're at an airport, I believe, terminal, but if, in fact, they were to get free, Florida State, do you honestly believe the Big Ten nor the SEC would be interested in them?
The Big Ten makes more sense to me. It's always made more sense to me. That gets you into a new market and also kind of allows you to plant a Big Ten flag in SEC country. It makes sense to me. Now, I think what I saw last week in some of the reports that came out reminds me a little bit of kind of what happened to Oregon and Washington was essentially we're not taking them at a full strike number, but maybe if the number's right, then maybe we would be a little bit more interested. So I don't see at this current juncture, especially after Oregon and Washington were forced to take a reduced share until the next TV contract, that Florida State would come in at the peak number right now. Now, if they're willing to take a lesser number and that it's just not going to cut into the shares for the other schools, then of course that makes them more desirable. I don't know what their stomach level is for that, but I think that changes the kind of conversation. Now, in terms of the SEC, I've reported this for years now. I'm going to continue saying it based on the people I've talked to. They are not interested in Florida State. That's not a never say never type situation. Things can change. They can be forced into action. But I've been repeatedly told by people that I trust that UVA and UNC are higher priorities. That gets them into two different states. They like that it kind of gives them, a greater geographic reach, but also still kind of fits into the overall geography of the SEC. Clearly, schools like Florida do not want Florida State to join. And I think there's an open question about, do they really up the money more? From what I've been told, the SEC does not believe that it does. And so there's not a major desire for them right now to add a school like Florida State.
John, what airport are you stranded in?
Currently in New Jersey. We'll see if I ever get out of here. We've been on the tarmac a couple times and then came back and then back. And so, I don't know. Looks like we might be boarding at some point in the near future. Who knows? It's if any of your listeners have to fly today, tomorrow, good luck. It's a disaster out here.
Oh, I've seen stories of the lines like Delta. Everyone's struggling. Well, good luck getting out of there. Hopefully you get out of there in time to get settled in at a hotel, get a nice meal, and get some sleep.
That would be lovely. Hopefully you guys are speaking truth by saying that. Enjoyed talking to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. The videos